Welcome back to another exciting episode of Super Design Bowl post-game report. It's just me this time. I'm sorry. No Aaron Seacrest. He wasn't available. I think he's having his second bar mitzvah right now. But on today's episode, we're going to be talking to TJ Harley of Harley Creative and Fraser Davidson of Cub Studio and Field Theory. They participated in the Yankees challenge, which is no small task. So let's bring them on.
Hello.
Hey boys, how's it going?
What's up, Billy?
Not bad. How you doing?
You know, I wore my Jog Lake T-shirt for pants, and he didn't show up. So great.
What
job.
is that? What is that?
It's a defunct amusement park in Northeast Ohio.
Oh, well,
I
I'm
used to
really
love
sorry.
So.
We could. He can type his comments in the YouTube comment section.
We'll fix it in post. We'll fix it in post.
So before we get into this, let's do a little bit of introduction for maybe the people that don't know, are new to you guys. So TJ, give me a little bit of your story, if you can.
Sure. I was the creative director at IMG College for about 11 years, and November 2012, I decided to go out on my own and start my own gig, which I've been doing ever since, here in Atlanta. Do a lot of sports stuff, but not as much anymore as I used to. Working
Is
a little
that just
bit more
naturally how your business has gone?
It came from just taking work wherever I can get it, and I started realizing that there was a lot more opportunity outside of sports. I still do some sports stuff, but not primarily as much anymore. But we're working with some beer brands, some nonprofits, that sort of thing. So
cool. And I mean, what's some of the sports stuff that you've done? You did Orange Bowl.
I've done some. Well, I used to do all college work in my old job. It was a collegiate licensing company, then IMG College, so it was all college. So lots of national championship logos, some event stuff. I used to do all the SEC football championship, basketball championship, that sort of thing, some other conference work. And then once I went on my own, I got hired by Joe to work with Fraser and Todd Radom.
Joe Bozak. Yeah.
On the NCAA rebrand and Final Four and all that sort of stuff. So got to do that, which was awesome. And, do work with your friends, which is the best kind of work.
Yeah, that is awesome. So do you prefer working in the sports field or outside of it now that you've got a taste of both?
To be honest with you, I got sort of tired of it after a little while, doing it day in and day out. And then I sort of realized that the longer I was out of it, the more I appreciated the work when I did go back into it and start working into it again. That creativity just kind of started flowing out of me because I wasn't doing it so much, So, but I do appreciate getting back into it every once in a while for sure.
Cool. And down below we've got Fraser Davidson. Are you there, Fraser? Are you on delay? Yeah. You're a little delayed. So Fraser, tell everyone your story in a nutshell.
So I have worked basically for 15 years in animation, motion graphic stuff. That's essentially my kind of primary mode of work. I worked for 6 years for a company called Mainframe in London. And then before kind of going freelance and then setting up my own company with Ben, who you both know, who's a sort of friend from school. And we've run Cub since 2004. A lot of work with Canadian Olympic Committee, UEFA, all sorts of things like that. But kind of on the side, and I guess especially while I was freelance, I did work with, as teacher said, with Joe and with Nike, some stuff with Reebok and Adidas, and a bunch of other sort of bits and pieces here and there doing sports branding. So I kind of have a little bit of kind of sports stuff on my books outside of the animation field.
So what's your like I mean, you have combined the two, with a lot of your NFL work where you do animation for sports things. Yep. But what's sort of so animation is probably 85% of what you're doing. 90%?
I mean, yeah, if not more, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, it used to be maybe closer to 70-30, but yeah, these days I don't really have time to kind of do much in the way of sports stuff, and it's one of those things where, unless you're kind of pursuing those clients, it's kind of hard to come by them. The two things are quite disparate, so it's difficult to get much overlap.
Yeah, it's interesting, but apparently you had time to do the intro for this video for me and to make a free Yankees logo for the website, so I appreciate that.
yeah, you owe me a lot of favors. It's cool.
I do. I did buy you some alcohol though, so I think that
you did. Yeah.
So before we talk about your guys' logos, I kind of want to talk real quick about the Yankees logo in general, sort of the history and sort of where it's at, and just kind of get your opinion on it. What's really interesting is you see the sort of current logo, for the most part, current, developed in 1909. It's sort of amazing how the longevity of this thing.
Yeah, just speaking specifically on the interlocking NY, it's weird that if you're not really paying attention, you don't realize that there's actually 3 different interlocking NYs that they use.
Yeah, I actually have
the 2 that are there. They have one for the hat, one for the helmet, and one for the jersey, and they're all different.
That's wild. That's crazy. You would,
and if you weren't really paying attention, you wouldn't really notice that.
Yeah, but why do you think that decision is made?
I have no idea. I think they've just been using it for so long, and it was that way for a while, and they just said, we're just going to keep it.
It just sort of got grandfathered in.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, but I think a lot of this stuff in sport is maintained on the grounds of kind of, tradition, and never kind of fixed. And, people don't want to kind of tweak this stuff. Or be the person who kind of, the equipment manager who kind of tweaks it or whatever.
Right.
Or you get some kind of parity across the design. And so it ends up being its own kind of thing. And now people would all be, the way the internet is, people will be fucked off if they tried to change it. So
yeah, but these are, the fact that nobody notices that they're using 3 versions, if you unified it to this version, which is arguably the best version, maybe this one has this one has a little more character to it, I guess. But if
and
you
they're all
change
kind
it
of really sloppily done. They're not.
They are sloppily done.
They're not super pristine or very well executed. But they were done in the early 1900s. So what do you expect? Nobody had Illustrator back then.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see who was drawing this on a piece of paper. And then obviously in the 40s they introduced this logo, which you don't really, which is sort of their Dodgers version.
Right. It's more of their club badge, club logo that they use for external purposes. You don't see it on any uniforms or anything like that.
But people love this. People love the lockup, and I think they do love it because of its sloppy naivete. To some extent,
it's certainly a classic, timeless logo. There's no doubt about that.
But it's kind of the case that like you say, like they could refine, they could get this down to a single mark, no problem. Looking at the hat and the on the bat Yankees logo with the baseball. Now the one you had up before. Are there any colors within that? Are there any colors in that? That does that blue even match the other Yankees blue?
No,
because it kind of looks like a different color.
It's a different blue.
It is strange. It is strange.
That's just sort of it's just a reflection of its time, right?
Well, and the fact that red is the primary color in that one, it's not even blue. They don't use red in any other aspect of their brand at all.
So this is post World War II and McCarthyism. So I think there was probably when this is the time period where they added "In God" to the national anthem. You know what I'm saying? Like this is a time where patriotism was run rampant in America. So put in that context, maybe this logo, the red, white, and blue of it with the stars and stripes makes sense. So let's talk about your guys' logos. And
by the way, you missed the golden opportunity to call this the Harley Davidson matchup.
Oh my
I'm surprised.
God.
You know,
I mean, you could have told me. You could have told me. I did. That's just.
I thought it was fairly obvious, but I guess
it really wasn't. I'm sorry.
Next time.
Yeah. Well, fuck it. Next. Yeah, there will be a next time. Best 2 out of 3, guys. Best 2 out of 3.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
No. Okay. So this is an interesting challenge, and when we kind of talked about this challenge, is the fact that the NY logo is so, even though it's sloppy, it's never really going to change, right? It's stuck. You know, when you see everybody doing fantasy logo designs out there, nobody's doing Yankees stuff because, frankly, nobody wants to touch it. So that's why I thought it would actually be interesting to challenge two of the top guys, which I consider.
I'm glad somebody thought it would be interesting to do
that. It was interesting for me because I could watch.
Right.
Not interesting for you guys. But when we talked about it in email, and I'm not going to. I don't want to call you out on this, Harley. We talked about an email. We could like, well, let's do a secondary logo icon. But then you went ahead and made just a version of the main logo.
Right.
Which is a little bit of a cheat.
Quite honestly, I forgot that we talked about that.
That's what I figured. So let's talk about Fraser's. Now, Fraser's, there's a little bit of drama with Fraser's too. Okay. I'm ready to admit this. Fraser did basically a suite of logos with his design. He did 3 versions, and I forced him to only show one because that was sort of a part of the rules. And so I apologize about that, Fraser. And perhaps if you were able to show your whole thinking process through the 3 different logos, maybe you would have won. So I'll take the L on this one.
Yeah. Well, the idea of that making the 3 near identical logos was that it's sort of a take on the Yankees' 3 nearly identical logos, and there being no reason to have the distinction between them. But the joke's somewhat lost if you only post one of them.
I apologize. You're still salty about it, and I understand. The
rules are the rules, aren't they? For the
yes,
for the brand new thing that you made up.
Yes,
at the time. Yeah.
If I give you special treatment, the players union is going to really come down on me.
Okay.
On this, I apologize. But this is really well done. This is really well executed, obviously, of course. And the concept is strong. When a logo is good, it doesn't need a lot of explanation, or it shouldn't. Right?
No, I mean, and especially given who it's for, it can't be. I don't think it could be too esoteric. It has to kind of be, to my mind at least, has to be not an N and a Y. But that's another rule. You take or you leave as you like, I guess. But I don't know. It was sort of a.
Oh, he paused out.
I guess like other kind of initial ideas would be like an apple with baseball stitches.
Yeah, that's sort of what's hit. I don't know. Has anyone ever done that? An apple with baseball stitching? That would make sense.
I'm sure
they must have. They literally must have.
Well, somebody sure has. You sent me this, which I think is really interesting. This is sort of your working process, which I think it really kind of delves into your sort of thought process and the way you kind of work through everything. Tell us about this a little bit. That kind of like how because this is how I work too. I'll get to a certain spot and then I'll sort of copy and throw it to the side so that I can at least go back to that if I need to go back to a certain point if I screw everything up.
Sure. Well, I think kind of some of the initial. I mean, there's only really one idea here, to be honest, but the kind of initial treatment of it was to use some of the line weight of the kind of the thicker NY Yankees logo. So try and take any aspect, I guess, of that and kind of, you know, make it something different. It's quite difficult to, because there's sort of the only type treatment is the NY or that Yankees very fine script. There's kind of nothing that really ties their brand together as a kind of consistent whole. So
apart from the pinstripes, right?
Apart from the pinstripes,
yeah,
which are quite difficult to work into a logo. I think, you know, like having that like disparity in line width, I think, can be quite jarring in logos. I prefer to kind of keep it like it's got resolution at a particular size, and it can go very small, and it doesn't have kind of you don't want like in a digital environment that kind of fine pinstriping and stuff.
You're absolutely right.
So I ended up kind of moving away from that because it just sort of felt quite draplin in sort of execution. In the end, it felt a bit kind of not really sporty. So I tried to just sort of make it feel like it was of the sort of era and have a little bit of, you know, the kind of, I guess, the sort of the fun branding maybe that baseball has that certainly football does and basketball is sort of losing by just kind of adding like the little I think initially it started off as a leaf and then it became like a little flag pennant thing. But yeah, I
do like what you're doing. What you're kind of thinking about here is modifying the NY into the apple shape, which I think is a cool sort of. It looks like you abandoned it pretty early, but it's a cool concept to kind of explore.
I dig that one on the right there with the New York in it. Right there.
Well, he did. So you can see that in this section.
Yeah, so
that was a part of the suite. Yeah.
It almost looks like something that would have been one of their programs or something in the early 1900s, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Like around when the time they had the World's Fair there or something, you know. It kind of has a little bit of that World's Fair globe look to it.
One other thing I want to note about your design, Fraser, is, and I think some of this stuff is taken for granted or not noticed by amateurs or just sports fans or whatever. The care that you took, and you maybe take it for granted because it just makes sense to you, but like when you have these, like, just look at the stem and the flag, like the way that everything is curved and smoothed out. There's no like hard points in this, and you match that style throughout the whole thing. You know, when I look at my students' work, there's no consistency to style or line weight when they're working on their stuff. And when I see something like this, it's like, okay, this asshole knows what he's doing, you know?
I mean, maybe some of that comes from trying to, you know, the treatment of it, like trying to make it feel like, you know, I guess the original, you know, the strange thing about the original logos, I guess, is that they were never designed in the computer. They were taken in and kind of outlined, and it's supposed to kind of maybe have a feel of that. So those edges wouldn't have been really sharp.
Yeah.
You would have shaped.
This episode's going to need some editing.
Like more hand drawn.
We missed that, Fraser. You may want to.
Yeah. You paused out there.
Okay, yeah. So the shading, you know, is meant to look like it's got got a little like hand drawn quality to it, and it's not. They're not all exactly the same element, although they are. They're just resized.
And that's sort of what I like about that other one, where it would almost be like somebody hand drew it in one of their game programs or something, or a scorecard or something.
Yeah.
It definitely brings out more of the context of it in something like that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yep. So let's talk enough time with the losers. Let's talk winners here. So, my bad. Come on. There we go. So this was not just I like this because it was not just a cleanup, right? It was a cleanup, right? But it was adding. You also added something to it, a lot to it.
Right.
But somehow you made it modern or contemporary, but still sort of old-fashioned looking as well.
And kind of going back to what we talked about earlier about if you were to ever take, let's just say hypothetically, the Yankees said, let's redo the NY, which clearly they would never do, but let's just say for the sake of argument they did. It's almost like, well, what would that look like?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the approach I took with it.
Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let me ask you a question. This is something I'm really curious about. The inline in the shapes is, to me, that resembles a street map. Like if I'm looking down on New York,
or a subway map, yeah.
Yeah. So okay, was that intentional or is that
not originally? But the more I kind of refined it, I was like, oh, this sort of looks like a subway or a street. But it was also supposed to represent pinstripes too.
The pinstripes too. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think, Fraser?
Yeah, I like it. I like the negative space. There's one thing I've got a question about is, the stem of the Y where it meets the bottom.
No.
The bottom half. Yeah. See, right where your cursor is. Right
there.
No. Down and to the right there. That gap. Why is that gap there? Because that doesn't exist in where the other.
It doesn't exist over here. Yeah.
Right.
No.
I went through a bunch of different iterations of it being closed, being open, being the other side being open, and I think at the end of the day that one just looked right. You'd have to go back and look at. You'd have to go back and look at some of the other ones just to see it. I think that was just after looking at 3 or 4 of them, that one just looked right. But you're right; it's not consistent. Or maybe it was. I'm trying to remember. I think maybe it was doing it on the other side didn't look good.
Gotcha.
One or the other. I can't really remember, but something like that.
The one thing that I'm curious about is this part comes out. So like if let's say if I continue this line down the end,
right,
and then it sort of has to make a jog. Now I understand why. I feel like I understand why you've done that, because you have to make the inline a consistent weight.
Right.
Did that cause you any sort of?
Again, I have to go back and look. I feel like it was just a feel sort of thing. Where technically it should be straight, but when you look at it, it didn't. It either didn't look right or it didn't. The way it lined up just looked strange when it was like that, or it wasn't even on the bottom. Because that's the thing too, is trying to get the ascenders and the descenders equal, but then sometimes when you make them equal, they don't look right.
Yeah, the optical equal.
Right.
Yeah, it's so funny because I have a very geometric or mathematical way of designing and thinking about design, and then so many times I fall into traps like that where I'm like, well,
sure,
this should look right because it's completely mathematically right,
Right.
And I forget to use my feelings sometimes.
Right. Yeah. No, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought this was an excellent matchup, and an excellent execution. I would. I'm sorry, you cut out.
Sorry, I was just saying, like, I like the kind of the thick serif that kind of implies the thin kind of serif edges. I think that's kind of nice. So it's sort of, although it's like all has a particular width, the negative space is variable, which I think is like a nice kind of.
And again, I think that's just a feel sort of thing. If it was all the same, I don't think it would look right. So there's a lot of little tweaking in there to get that to look the way it does now. And a lot of it's just personal preference, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I think we did it, boys.
Nice.
Unless you have anything else to add? I will be posting after this. I'll be posting Fraser's full suite on the. I'll make sure everyone gets to see that. And if anyone wants to mail their congressman so they can do a revote, we can.
I can send you my little board too if you want that.
Awesome, guys! I really show and talking about the details of these logos. I'm sure that only appeals to like 5 people, but I find it really interesting, and I really
it appealed to at least 180 people.
Oh yeah, you're right. And the number, so that's great. And Fraser, now that I have you on the air, I just want to say thank you for all the intro stuff that you've done for us in the show and doing the logos, and I just really appreciate it.
No worries, man. No worries.
Okay. Have a good day, guys.
All right, guys.
Thank you. Have a good one. Catch you later. Bye.